This is the Math Map Book Club, where ordinary parents encourage one another to develop an extraordinary appreciation of math. We love what we know and struggle over the unfamiliar. Through weekly conversation and exploration among friends, we can begin to enjoy ideas that seem difficult. Join our book club as we discover how math helps us to know God and to make Him known.
Hi, good afternoon. It is February 5th, and we are looking at week 22, booklet 22. We have a little bit of difficulty with Lee being able to join, so we're hoping that she can join in a minute. And Dr. Gilpin and Babs are doing math things in another location. So they're not with us today and we will miss them very much. And I'm so excited to have the chance to participate with you in their absence. They are better at this than me by a long shot on using these kinds of things. So I appreciate your patience. And, I like to tell people a lot of times, if you do anything with me, that will let you know that you can also do it too. You can be a foundations tutor if you sit in my class. You can be an essentials tutor. You can be a challenge A tutor. You can do these things because everybody's always so gracious and we don't have to be perfect. So we're looking at booklet 22 and I'm still looking for the spot for the, oh, there it is. See, when you stall and talk, it's really not, it doesn't do the same thing as just being quiet and working on it. There, that's better. Okay, so booklet 22, and I'm Jill Philbrick. I've been part of the Math Map pilot for several years. It's been so much fun. I remember the very first time that we all met and we were handed booklets that I didn't know very much of what was in the booklet, and we got to go to another part of the house and just find a quiet spot and get out the booklet and using the charts complete the booklet. And I learned so much during that 1 week with nobody talking, just working with the booklet. And then we did have some times that we would all meet together and talk about questions or, what did you notice? What did you learn? And it really, really, from that experience, showed me how strong this curriculum was going to be. And I've considered myself a math person since then, even though I didn't know that I was. So I hope that you are having the same experience. We're going to be looking at our map to start off. And so we're in populations right here, booklet 22. And if you recall, last week we were in locations. And so it's kind of neat that populations follows locations because where we are and then a little bit about who we are really pulls together these ideas. And so no matter what booklet you're working in, we're all on that line for 22. And also this is our last week in 3D before we move into 4D. So again, remembering that we started out in 0D, then we moved into 1, 2, 3, and reminding our students of what that is, depending on what day of the week you're working. At home, you might want to have one day that you spend more on the art, another day that you spend more reminding them about dimensions, another day that you talk more about those domains. If you're working with Challenge A students in class, then this would just be the sort of thing that you would want to make sure that occasionally you bring back up and you ask them again, okay, what does it mean that we are in 3D? And then looking ahead into 4D, they all seem to enjoy looking at the image of the 4D and have a lot to say about the tesseract there. All right, so we have our quick flip arithmetic game that we're going to be doing, and I'm looking for my, this is, okay, is that it? Will that do it? I'm hoping. The screen was larger than my screen and it didn't let me start the timer the way I wanted to. So hopefully I clicked the right thing and accepted their terms. Okay, so we're gonna spend a little bit of time with the quick flip arithmetic. So if you played last week or you've been doing this at home, I'd love during this time for you to also share what you've done. So obviously here we would read it aloud. Does anybody want to read it aloud?
So do you mean like 6 times the quantity, -9, -7? Is that
Yes.
what you mean?
Yes, exactly. And reminding us that Dr. Gilpin last week said that 6 times the quantity, that in foundations they might have heard opening parentheses, -9, -7, or -9 plus -7, closing parentheses. And that is still great. But as they get older and they're talking with other math people doing other math things, being able to say 6 times the quantity really helps keep that concise and keep those parentheses where they need to be. What else do you see here? What are the different ways to calculate this?
Well, you would have to do what's in parentheses first. So that would be -16. So do you say 6 times the quantity -16?
I think
Is that,
since the -16 is all one number, you can just say 6 times -16.
oh,
But when there's two things with an operation, you'd want to say the quantity. And then the one below that, we see they distributed. So how would a student read that?
6 times -9, um, minus six
Oh,
times 7. No. Do you know what? I can't read what's written because the timer's on top of it.
the
So I was
timer,
just,
and
I mean, I should be able to
that's,
just say this, right?
nope, that's okay. And it's on top
I
of it
think
on
it's
mine too.
I
Oh,
think
oh,
it's
but
six
there's a
times
plus,
-9 plus 6 times -7
-7. That would be better.
Yes.
Right.
And
equals
that would give us a
Yes.
-54 plus a
a
negative
-42.
-42.
42,
42.
right?
Yes. So you're
And
adding.
then that equals -96.
Exactly. So have you played this at home? Our timer's going to run out and we aren't done. Have you played this at home? Have you practiced with it? What ideas do you have to share?
I haven't done it at home, but I think it would be very useful.
It would be, right? It would be an easy travel game. Like you could bring your whiteboard and a deck of cards. You could even open this up and put two cards, one on top of the other, so that now you have a fraction. So you can use more cards than just what's there. So if you stack them, you've got fractions, and you can talk about whether it makes a difference having like a negative on the top or a negative on the bottom. Does that do the same thing to your fraction? You can, with your young children, keep those denominators the same, which, this is great if you have someone in the fractions level, but keeping those denominators the same so that they're distributing and they're following along. But with our older students, challenge them, push them a little, challenge ourselves. Maybe it's been a minute since we worked with fractions. And so we want to make sure that we are staying fresh. Sometimes we can get a little rusty if we don't keep using the things too. You can make the reds negative. You could hide some. You could do it in an algebraic form. There's just lots of different things that you can do with this. As we were talking about that just now, though, did any ideas come to you that you're thinking, oh, I'd kind of like to try this or that?
So you're saying that the black cards would be the positive numbers and the red cards are negative numbers. That's how that would work.
Yes, I think that's what they're demonstrating here with the negative and the 9 and the -7. You wouldn't have to with your young kids. You could pull all one color and you could just do the blacks. That way you keep that idea in their head. Any other thoughts or ideas on how to use this game as a warm-up or a review or different numbers involved?
I think to challenge the older students, even in the challenge years, is to just use the face cards, and then they would have to do the
Definitely.
12s, 13s, and 14, or yeah, 13s, 14s, and
Yes.
15s.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, and plus then they have to think of it in their head. They have to go, okay, the jack is 11 kind of thing. And aces, you could buy blank cards and fill them in with some complex, like a 0 eye, a 4 eye, some things like that if you wanted to. There are different, you could use any deck of cards. You could use phase 10 cards, you could use Uno cards. I mean, you can use anything you want, but if you want cards that go higher numbers, Rage, now they're hard to read. I think they're kind of smushed on top of each other. They aren't as friendly to just a quick glance and knowing what number you're looking at, but they do go up through 15. So there's that. And even just flashcards, like the 1 through 100 number flashcards that you can buy at the store, you could use those. And then you could have some bigger numbers in there too. Obviously, in digits, a basic deck of cards is ideal because you can pull 10 and up out and be done with it and just focus with those smaller numbers there with them. All right. So we're looking today at populations. So I'll start our timer. And what strikes you first when you look at this cover?
It looks like a family tree, and I wish I had a magnifying glass because I can't see what it says.
A lot going on there.
I
Yeah.
don't know if I can. Oh, does that help?
Yeah.
Not letting me slide it too much, but I'm trying. If I'm not
I'm looking
visible.
at it and in the like live version, and Noah is at the bottom, and then on the left side is Europe, and on the right side is Africa, and in the middle is Asia. So I guess it's Noah's family tree and showing Shem and Ham and Japheth, I would think.
Yeah, I think you're right. Anything else that stands out to you or you notice or you think when you see this?
Well, Noah's Ark with the animals going 2 by 2 on the right side with the rainbow.
Right. It definitely points to, populations, the story of different things, different people, different cultures. It's kind of neat that as we talked about locations and now we're moving into populations, not only are we saying people are located at this place or this point is located at this place, but now what are the statistics involved with that information, right? How many people living in this place are over this age or under this age or participate in this sport. Hi, Lee. I'm glad you were able to join us. I hope your technology keeps working.
So is the left side representing the Tower of Babel?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then the animals are walking out of the ark. So the ark is in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And then the family tree kind of from there. Would anybody like to read the quote or the reflection? Is it too small? Is it hard to get to?
I can read the quote.
Great.
If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. Albert Einstein.
There's probably a positive and a negative side to that. If you worry and spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem in that sense, that might not be very healthy. But if you're thinking about what do I need to know to solve this, that can be really productive. Have you ever felt that maybe you need to think about this and not rush to try to immediately figure something out, but spend a minute with what laws do I know? What things do I know to be able to do this?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, finally. Okay, so it's finally working. Yeah, when I was in engineering and I took a PhD level course in math, on our exam, we had to set up a 4 equations by 4 unknown problem, and we had 3 hours to do it in, and there was no way to solve it in that amount of time. And so that's one of the things that I just really appreciate about studying engineering is people think it's about math, but it's really about organization and systems. So I just wanted to throw that in to encourage you to encourage your children who maybe don't think they're good at math, but if they're really organized, to pursue engineering because of how much it helps you to look and see the unseen.
That's very encouraging because we do think of engineering as being good at math, but to know that there's an element of that that is, I mean, the computer will do the math for you if you will organize it, right? So would anybody like to read the reflection here from Psalms? We'll have a short coffee break and come back. Everybody can talk a little more. Okay, I'll read it. Bow down thine ear, O Lord, hear me, for I am poor and needy. Preserve my soul, for I am holy. Actually, that is really tiny for me too. Let me read it from the actual book. Preserve my soul, for I am holy. O thou my God, save thy servant that trusteth in thee. Be merciful unto me, O Lord, for I cry unto thee daily. Rejoice the soul of thy servant. For unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. For thou, O Lord, art good and ready to forgive, and plenteous in mercy unto all them that call upon thee. Give ear, O Lord, unto my prayer, and attend to the voice of my supplications. In the day of my trouble I will call upon thee, for thou wilt answer me. Psalms 86, 1-7. So what are your thoughts on that verse in regard to populations or statistics?
Well, this, the picture has so many different things and people and stuff going on, but I love that these verses bring it back to the Lord sees each one of us. We are an individual before him. We have a personal relationship with him, even though there's a multitude of people, and he wants to know us personally. Like that's pretty amazing when you stop and think about it.
I agree. It really is. It's very humbling and at the same time increases your self-image. You can feel very small and very important at the same time when you think about that.
I always wonder if the Lord uses spreadsheets to keep track of all of us.
Well, somebody got that idea, and I believe it was a good idea. So another thing that we can, I'm looking at the notes that I have here. We could talk about even the domains and people, or populations in those domains. So if you were talking about 1D, that would be dimensions. So the domains, though, we could talk about natural numbers. So we could skip count for a little bit, some natural numbers with those animals on the ark. But after a while, we'd have to get into integers, right? Or the math of different people, or how many people are doing this, how many people are doing that. What things work well with fractions and what things don't in statistics. People don't work well with fractions. Cookies do. So what kinds of these different domains would work well with different populations and with statistics could be a great conversation for your students.
I also like how the locations on the left with the spiral building, they're not quite circles, right? Because it spirals around. And so the populations never are exact in their locations when it comes to people.
That's true.
And animals move too all the time.
Yes.
And
Yes. If
waves.
anybody's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And waves. So when
Yes.
you're trying to do population analysis in terms of the location, like we did last week, or the locus, you can get really bad data and not know it.
That's very true. Hmm. That's worth thinking about as our students. If you're ever doing this with students who haven't done science fair yet, this would be a great week for them to think ahead about what would be coming the next year and
Mhm.
what kinds of things do they need to know to be as accurate as possible. So I'm trying to move. We're running out of, this time's almost over. Any other thoughts about 3D or about populations? It's it's dear to my heart because I love people. And I believe that when we're moms and when we're dads and when we're homeschool people, we tend to love people. Any other thoughts? This would be a great topic to include any kind of missionary type things that you are studying or following after. You can talk about, where are those missionaries in locations, but also in populations, and what are the statistics? What are the statistics of your neighborhood? What are the statistics of your city, of your state, of your nation, or of other nations where maybe you have missionaries from your church or other homeschool people? It can be, how many dollars have we saved? What's our goal? It could be how many dollars we're saved on this year or this year or this year or this year. Are we gaining momentum or losing momentum? Are how many people were of different kinds of religions in those areas? And is the church growing in those areas where a mission has been planted? Lots of different things to consider there. I'm clicking on my screen and it is not advancing. Does anybody know what
We're patient.
I could be doing wrong? You guys are.
You might
So
still be
patient.
zoomed. You had zoomed in. I wonder if you have to zoom back out
Oh,
all the
whoops.
way. Oops.
Maybe that will do it now. There.
Oh.
You are so smart. Okay. All right. So now we're taking a look at our first I page, the invention page. And when we're looking at this, is there anything that you see that you think your students are familiar or unfamiliar with?
Especially in Challenge A, our students, for us, our community, we just had our science fair. I think all communities would have had their science fair. And so the students should be very familiar with this page with what they chose to do their results with.
Absolutely. It's colorful, it's friendly. It sometimes, again, just having shapes on a page can feel very approachable. The arrangement, though, the invention of the canon of arrangement in this invention page is a great thing to focus on. Like Lee was saying about engineering, the arranging of things. So, are any of these, do you think, new to your Challenge A students?
I was thinking when you do, at least in Saxon math, which most of them have been doing, they use the tree diagrams to do the factoring.
Mhm.
And then in science fair, the bar graph and the pie chart are probably favorites. I've not seen necessarily a box and whisker diagram.
Mm-mm. No, I haven't either. If you had an outlier that you wanted to include, you might use that, but you'd have to have specific things you were researching to have one. I think one of the things that even my own older kids, that when I started the Challenge A pilot, my youngest of four was in Challenge A. And so my older son was in Challenge 1 or 2, and he liked what he was hearing with us. And so he came over and sat with us and asked if he could just do this with us. So he quit doing Saxon and started doing complex with us in Challenge A. And then because complex was what we had for several years, both my boys did complex again and again and again. So we've done a lot of complex. But the very first year that they saw this, the bar graph and the histogram, they had not ever really noticed that there was a difference between those two.
Mm.
So they, I mean, they just saw bars going up. And so spending some time with that was important for us at home. So I would say even asking our students to describe or to what any two, pick two, what's different about them, especially two that look similar, like the bar graph and the histogram. So what do you think would be the difference in a bar graph and a histogram? Either you already know or you can tell by reading this or guess.
Mhm. So I guess I'll try to answer. So the histogram has a range of data across the bottom or x-axis versus the bar graph at the top can have groups of data. They can be totally unrelated to each other, but there's a relationship that's closer in the histogram.
Yeah, so if your students try to do a bar graph um, in a histogram situation, you wouldn't have between 4 and 5 dogs. You would have 4 dogs or 5 dogs, right? Um, and you might have a variety of pets. With the histogram, it might like Lee was saying, they would need to relate. Like a house might be between 1,000 and 2,000 square feet, between 2,000 and 3,000 square feet. But you might say, I live in a house or a tent or a tree house or an RV, but you would, so you can have different kinds of things in the bar graph, but on the histogram between this and this range, which was a whole new thing to me. I'm sure that I worked with that at some point, but actually spending the time and looking at it and recognizing the difference was helpful to me because of the math map. Also, the array was new to me. Have you all worked with those before?
Is this sort of what you would do in like in biology when we had the genetics? Like,
Genetics.
yeah,
That's what I would think.
Your
that's
P
where
table.
yes.
Yes, it is. It's very much like that. Um, then you can also, like in the booklet, it will do things like a pizza order, the T for topping, the C for crust. So thick crust, thin crust, and then whether you got plain cheese, whether you got pepperoni, whether you got veggies, whether you got, so you could put together a whole sandwich order or pizza order in your community by people choosing the crust and choosing the topping that they want, assuming they only want one of the toppings. It's a little bit like essentials too, right? Where we have the those 112 sentences. You have this kind of this and this kind of that, and that gives you this.
They're good for keeping track of multiple arrangements. They're it's basically a spreadsheet.
Right. Yes, it really is. So get our kids hooked early on spreadsheets.
I think what you were on earlier about comparing the bar to the histogram, it made me think about if this is your first year through the math map, this might be the first place at week 22 where you can talk about range and your children might actually be familiar with the word.
Mm.
It's neat how those words come back through. At times they're familiar to us, and at times they're not, depending on what we're looking at. And then building up through this point and recognizing that and knowing that next year they're going to have so much more, a much faster introduction. But I would encourage you, don't skip the art. Just because you did it last year and this year you're doing it again, still do the art, still do the chart pages, still do the eye pages. Don't skip those things and go straight to the lesson pages just because you've seen this book before. Because those conversations and looking closely, making those comparisons and those ahas is really the point.
I really like that the bar graph, the line graph, and the pie chart all show the same representation in different ways.
Mhm.
So that was, thank you. It was beneficial.
Nice. They always do such a good job of giving us so many visual examples. And I love that things are color coded. Just helps everything. So let's take a look at our Memoria and arrangement page here. the 5 canons of rhetoric, and we're reviewing here. Now, some of our students haven't really worked with these necessarily. They've done it, they just don't know they've done it. Our 5-year-olds have used these, they just don't know they used these, right? They practiced their presentation and they decided what they wanted to come first and what their order of different things and what they have to say about it. They've done this, they just don't know they've done it. But this is a great place, a wonderful reference sheet for us in math to refer our students back to. So I won't spend a lot of time here since we spent more time on the other page, and I'm sure you all are pretty familiar with this. So the charts, there's a lot of charts all in one slide here, but if you're taking a look, again, we have the 5 core habits. Since we're doing statistics and populations, it's a great time to review what is it we're actually looking at. What are the 5 core habits? What does it mean to attend? What does it mean to name the things that we are actually comparing? Do they compare? And if they compare, what kind of chart do we need? Or what kind of visual demonstration do we need to represent that data? And how much of it is based on our memory? And do you trust your memory? And how are you going to memorize what you're presenting well enough to share it with others? Again, the expressing, and it does tell a story. And then we have memoria, where our addition, our subtraction, our multiplication. So lots of math facts, lots of remembering different laws, remembering definitions of dimensions, domains, and then some wonderful words here that help us. Again, this is a wonderful, every chart is a great reference, but there's some that just having handy extra, I like to pull my charts out and keep them in a small binder as I go. But what kinds of words and what does it mean it's asking us to do? So if any of you have this booklet in front of you where you can see it a little bigger, what do you have any thoughts on not only the first chart, but any of the charts that stand out to you?
And the one about me is no longer true.
Where is that?
Oh, next to between but not including. Lee solved more than 1,000 problems, but less than 10,000.
So you've seen more than 10,000 now?
Oh, easily.
Maybe we
But I
can
like
make
that
it a
Kirsty.
million?
Yeah, not a million. But I like that Kirsty gave us like examples. And then the words on the left, I mean, to me, this is another car school kind of game where you could just say some of these words just randomly, the ones that you know, you don't have to use the chart, but the chart can give you them if you don't. And just ask the student, what symbol would you use? Or put that into a sentence, a math sentence.
Yes. Car school is so wonderful. And I think that we maybe don't always realize how much they learn while we're doing that. I think my children learned how to read doing car school by asking, what does that start with? What is that sound? So yes, that time that we spend is valuable. Then we have, let me pull my booklet here too. So on the first chart, we just talked a little about those words, those definitions and comparisons. On chart 2, which is this one here in the middle, we're having more review and a little deeper in the 5 common topics with comparison. One thing that I especially like on this particular one is this one. How can I make it like other problems I am familiar with? I think teaching our kids that it's okay to do that and then compare and grow is very freeing. I mean, we do it anyway, but we might as well let them know they're not cheating when they do that.
Yeah, so one thing that we've worked on really hard is that whenever somebody knows words or knows number sentences, they forget how they learned them. And so throughout the math map, we're constantly trying to show a series of problems that are similar in some regard, so that if you come across something new, you can say to them, well, let's look at what you did before, like on page 1, how does that relate to page 5? So that they can start setting up what I've already done to use for what they're going to do. And so a lot of times I think a good way to do the math map, once you have a lot of children, or you've been through it a lot of times, is to just take week 1 of all 12 levels and do that. And then week 2 of all 12 levels and do that. And then week 3, and you don't have to even do all 12. You could do 5 or 6 of them, because then you would
Right.
see how the basic problems help you keep going to the harder ones where the language is more difficult and the numbers are more unfamiliar.
That's brilliant. I like
Well,
that.
I didn't come up with it. Some moms have been doing that.
Well, we have brilliant people all over the place, thankfully.
Mhm. Oh,
Oh, I'm getting better at this. See, you guys say it that way. I'm getting better at this instead of.
mhm,
Okay, right here is where the array is located. And
mhm.
I mean, it's pretty much what you saw before, but it does let us know what we're comparing. It's a nice lead in to what they're going to be doing in matrices later.
Yeah.
You know, that they have these pieces that fit together and how they're going to layer on top of other pieces. So this takes all those different or more of those arrangements and gives us a chance to see what they look on. In challenge A, the part to whole diagram should fit right in with what they're doing in fallacy detective and how they have part to whole and whole to part and being able to recognize those things. What's neat here is that it very clearly explains combinations and permutations. And I believe that, I mean, this is even basic first year college math. So the fact that they're introduced to this now is pretty great. Were you about to say something, Lee? Okay. So
No,
in combinations, oh, go ahead.
no, I said, no, I'm just looking at it.
Oh, okay. In combinations, order doesn't matter, but in permutations, it does. So Sudoku, it matters. Once you've used the 9 in that row, you don't get to use the 9 in that row again. So now you only have 8 choices left. Once you've used the 4 and the 9, you only have 7 choices left. You can't have a full number of choices every time once you've used them. Or even if you're putting people in a car, you know, once one person is seated, there's only so many seats left. That seat is already taken, right? So those permutations. And then combinations, it doesn't matter. You get to multiply all the things times all the things over and over. I remember that challenging me a lot when I was doing it as a kid. So then over
That was,
here, whoops.
that was a good explanation, Jill, of examples to learn. Cause yeah, so getting in a car for our little guys and then Sudoku, it's a good game anyway for those older kids.
Yeah, yeah.
I love that it says there how to read that, the permutations. I was actually, oops, oh, sorry. I'm
Go ahead.
double.
There you go.
What I was going to say is that I was going to ask today, goodness, having trouble with my technology.
Oh.
The permutations card, I wasn't sure how to read that, and I was going to ask you today. So, sorry, I'm going to stop to talk.
Did we answer it, or do you still have questions about how to read it? I'll check the chat and see. Okay. I'm not sure. Lee, do you have anything you would add about permutations that could help people read that?
Well, she was saying that it tells you how to read it, and that was making her happy.
Okay. Okay, good.
I think she's good.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna try to get back here again without making everybody dizzy. And then on this chart, it's not letting me pull but that you guys can see it. It's just that I have your faces there. Okay. Here, different kinds of data, which is also pretty great information to have. Statistics, sampling, categorical data, quantitative data, and probability. So again, these are things that your sixth grader or your last year in foundation student who's heading into Challenge A, spending a little bit of extra time here can really help them have a little bit of peace when they're going into science fair. This is not what you want to necessarily throw at your seventh. It would be lovely for them to have done it when they were the last year in foundations, because when they're already doing science fair is not maybe the time to also say, and learn this too. But to give them this heads up a year earlier and to be aware of this can really be great.
Something I struggled with, because I never had a really good statics course, was this whole idea of the independent dependent, because I'm so used to just thinking fast and not always recognizing that a range of numbers is the domain and the other one's the answer, or the one that depends on that domain. So that's a place where your children may struggle. And then the other one is, arrangement, outcome, probability, chance. They don't all mean the same thing. And I thought they did. And so we tried really hard to arrange the problems with the right instructions. So even though the math is probably fairly simple in this lesson for all ages, the concepts are actually pretty difficult, and it comes down to the application of the uses. Like, why and when would you use the whisker plot versus, the arrangements you showed? And then when is it you're really trying to count your outcomes or your permutations or your arrangements that are possible? Like, the questions to ask aren't easy.
Right. So if you are aware of that ahead of time, even though this in some ways is a more restful week math-wise, okay, so I shouldn't say math,
Calculation.
calculations-wise, yes. The calculations might feel more restful, but this is not the week to then say, oh, breeze through and yay for you that you got a simple calculations week. This is definitely the week to, since we're aware of that, to look at what made this the best, what made this the best choice, what made this information fit this form or this arrangement the best, and what words are the clearest communication we can give when we're asking or answering those questions.
I think too, having this fall on this week, so that's going to be, our community just had science fair and we're going into week 20 tomorrow. So this is 2 weeks later. It'll be kind of a nice review of, what kind of statistics did we see in, Johnny's science fair or Susie's project, or, have them recall back. So it's kind of layering that learning. So.
Absolutely, because they just did it. It's the experience of it will definitely give them a lot to say. Any other thoughts on these charts before we move on? Okay. All right. Any testimonies or questions from your booklet 22 or any booklet? Booklet 21 or any booklet? Are there any ahas you've been having?
I would just like to point out that the whole location is more difficult than it has to be for this generation, because they're not used to giving directions, and they're not used to saying, it's within 5 miles of Walmart, which would be a circle because of the GPS. And so this would be a good opportunity to maybe compare GPS answers at home to the assignments in the location. Like, say to them, where would you use this, and what does your GPS say about that location? So I'm just trying to tie into new technologies.
Yeah, that's That's really good.
Mhm.
And practicing using them just for fun is really nice because then you aren't, it isn't always an assignment. Sometimes it's just a fun family activity,
Yeah.
right? To hike or to walk, to load, what's the app? The Geo app that you can
Oh,
see where you
geocaching?
are.
Oh, that
Yes,
one.
yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, that could be a lot of fun to look at how far away are we and then what's the territory that this would include? Or if your family is in the middle of planning to buy something and buy a new lot, you know, download the GPS, the wherever you can tell where you are on the property line. Are you close to the property line? Are you not on the property line as you're walking and doing those things?
Yeah, your GPS. The other thing that's been fun is drones. So my son has a drone, and as far as location goes, it can fly for 35 minutes and it can go 12 miles. So even though it takes me almost 40 minutes to drive to his house, if he wants to know what I'm doing, he can send his drone. And so just thinking about that, so our students, in spite of all the technology robbing them of information, if we can integrate it into our lessons and help them to see the unseen with their phones and with the drones and with their car speedometers and all those things. And locations is one of the lessons where those connections can be easily made.
Yeah. I think knowing those things helps students to see value in what they're learning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My students ask me that a lot. Where does this fit? Where does that fit?
Mm-hmm.
When will I ever use this? And there's almost always some really cool answers if you just know what technology is needed where. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the lesson pages. So I keep moving you guys around, so my eyes are all over the place so I can see your faces. Here we are. We have read the bar graph. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. And there's a survey of pets. We're asking them to label the pie chart and to do a little bit of calculating, just calculating those percentages, right? Notice that the information is all related. Like it fits each other, right? So the dogs over here, the dogs at 15, and then over here, we have this 15 again, right?
Yeah, I want to point out, Jill, just for folks that don't know, if you look at DNZ, digits, naturals, integers, they do not all fit. Here's why. We wanted them to have the opportunity to read some of the histogram pie charts with some easy fractions, but they weren't ready to work in fractions. So it didn't always match up with the left side and the right side in order to fit in the common fractions.
Okay.
Right, because on D and Z, they're not going to do any fraction work, but they should know what half a pi is or a third of a pi is.
Yes. They should be pretty familiar with that. I mean, half for sure, because or how many children are in their house. If you've got 2 children, you're very familiar with halves. If you've got 3, you're familiar with thirds, because you want them to be even when you're a kid. You want that thing cut properly. My mom used to have us cut the cookie, and whoever did the cutting did not get to do the choosing, which meant that the cutter became very precise because the chooser was going to figure out which one was bigger. So that's the top of page 1. Any questions or comments on this one? Okay, page 2. We have the histogram. So remember how we talked about there's that range, that return of between 0 and 2%, between 2 and 4%, between 4 and 6. So that's where that histogram, and we're asking them to even color, to put the information into the histogram. And this is where we want our kids not to just draw a line and make it a histogram. What's the difference in a histogram and a bar chart? So go ahead and fill it in completely.
And then if you don't know the answer to the categorical question that was there, that's to lead you back to the chart because it's just a simple answer. And so it says practice with chart reading or the glossary would work.
So either of those are great places. And so these resource reminders, they are especially valuable in class because it helps our students to know what each part is for and what's their parents' place. When they hear themselves say over and over, my parents can answer my questions, it does build some confidence in them that their parents can answer these questions. And then their parents begin to have to answer the questions. The parents begin to expect the students to ask them questions. So, and for them, the parents to say, I don't know. Well, we've said in class over and over, what is the Math Map companion for? So my parents can answer my questions. So if the parent says, I don't know, the student can say, well, what is the Math Map companion for? So my parents can answer my questions, right? So they can help the parent. Really, so much of, I think, misunderstanding that we have with our students' work has to do with us not knowing our materials, us not knowing what is provided, what's in the book, and having actually looked in the book to see what information is there. There's a lot there that we might just not be seeing, and so we think we don't know it, and we think we can't find it, but it's there. So using the resources that we have. And then we have support for families. Lots of support for families. If you think about this, this is it maybe 8 years or so since, I think Lee said last week, was it you or Dr. Gilpin? One of you all said 8 years since you all had that conversation, that
8 years.
initial sit down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't start writing it till 2 years afterwards. We spent the first 2 years researching and figuring out the philosophy, and then we started writing.
I mean, that's a commitment to something. I think about that, and would I plan it for 2 years and then do it? You know, we will never know, or I haven't so far. But but think about that, and the time that has gone into it, the resources that have gone into it. So the support for families is so much more than what we see right here and right now. That support was in the mind of Lee, of her team of developers from the beginning, and their heart was always, how do we make this glorify God? How do we make it classical? How do we make it doable for students? And how do we equip the parents? Because it's really, I love that it's over and over, it's really about the parents. And so, and if you haven't done the naturals for yourself as a parent, it's really one of the best things you can do. It so equips you to have those conversations with your students. Just like that comparison piece where it said, how can we relate this more challenging problem to something that was more approachable or that we already did? As a parent, if we do those naturals, we've done that smaller, more approachable thing that didn't take all of our time because we're still cooking dinner and we're cleaning and we're driving people to work and we're doing all the other things that grown-ups are doing. But if we have the time to do that naturals, then it is the best way for us to partner with our kids and to really to pull the naturals out and say, okay, we'll figure this out with me. So we do have the lots of CC connected things available to you. You have your tutors, you have your community, and as it continues to grow, that community is going to expand and expand until the whole community, just like everybody talks about a piece of Foundation's memory work or what they noticed in chemistry that matched up to something they learned back when they were in Essentials or wherever. They're having those conversations in community. Math is going to do the same thing, and it's going to be so fun. You have an email that you can reach out if you find anything or have some questions. Obviously, the live Math Map Book Club with it all archived so that you can reach it to anytime you need to. And then we have, let's see, coming up next week is, how exciting, in 4D matrices. And so it's a fun week, lots of excitement there, I hope. Any thoughts, questions, anything you'd like to say or share or add?
I love the tie-in there at the end when Lee said that she and Kirsty talked for 2 years before they started to write the curriculum made me think of our quote at the beginning of this lesson, where Albert Einstein said, you know, he would take 55 minutes to think about the problem. And that's that there was this intentional, like, thinking about the problem. What is the problem? We don't do math well in our country. And so how can we fix that problem? And I am so excited about the solution you guys have come up with. So
Thank you.
I agree. I agree. I've told people before that I went to a public junior high, elementary school and junior high, and I went to a Christian high school. And the thing that made it Christian was that in our math, we added disciples, not that it glorified God. It was just that we put things God made in the math, but we didn't find God in math. We didn't see his faithfulness in math. We didn't recognize his character in math. And we didn't talk about how he left a dimension outside of his in order to come into our dimension to relate to us. All those things were not there. And so one of the things that I love the most about all of this, I love that I have grown in math, but I really love that God really is glorified, and that that the things that we've said all these years about you can find God here and you can see his faithfulness and his characteristics there. It's now in black and white in booklets for anybody who wants to participate.
Thanks,
And I
Jill.
think,
I know he's pleased.
yeah, and adding on to that, I think still saying that in a way that speaks to some of those kids that are still very apprehensive, like I want to get better at that. But in my Bible study this year, I'm just seeing the theme of the unseen through all of Scripture now. Like it kind of feels new and related to math, but actually I think it's a biblical theme of the unseen being seen.
Absolutely. Well,
That's
God talks
great.
about that so much, you know,
Yeah.
that the things which are unseen are the things that are permanent, and the things which are seen are temporal, or that he spoke and this happened, or that, you know, we therefore believe and then speak. All those, and in philosophy, I have a son in Challenge 3, and so definitely the unseen, the seen, what's permanent, what's temporary, what's real, what's not real. It all relates, it all ties together. So that unseen theme, I'm so thankful that it was given to us to include. It came through math, but it does relate to everything we do. Because it's all math, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it all math? Isn't it all spelling? Isn't it all Latin? Isn't it all language? It's all everything.
It's language. Yeah, it's true.
Well, the book club, I think our time, we have still 2 minutes to rejoice together. So is there anything, any slide you'd like to see again, or anything at all that you'd like to say or ask?
I also was thinking this chart too, and that I'm just gonna take that out and put that in my directing binder next year, because I just feel like math has probably been one of the hardest places to apply the common topics. And when I first started directing challenge, we'd have the kids bring a problem, and then we realized like kids were not equipped to lead a discussion with those questions in math. And I'm like, yes, because I'm not either. And I think the math snippets that were in there for directors started having these, but I think this is a really going to be a useful reference to just continue to grow in that ability, because I won't be directing a level with math, that I'll be in one. So I'm really excited about this page.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to be doing 4 next year again, and the new physics book that we are, going to be using, I've already used math map materials to help me understand more of the physics terms and just get very precise in the definitions that are in the new physics book that is calculus for everyone, which is math. So it's been fun to read just the first, I don't know, I'm only on the first, like 1.6, so first chapter, but the math map has proven to be a very great resource for me.
Yeah, Catherine, in a few weeks when you've read more, I'd appreciate you giving us some feedback, because that physics book was, we just loved it because Kirsty and I could see that what we were doing was already integrated in that book. And it made it so we didn't have to go write it. Somebody else had already thought the same thoughts. So.
Well, I'm making notes for myself because I need it for next year. So, so as I start compiling everything, it's just, it was very fun to be able to see the actual words, but then to go to the math map and see the definitions and see an explanation and see an example that provided those grammar words.
Yeah. I know that over and over, we've been encouraged that some things, the math map refined and curated a definition or made a word more precise, but other things are really the way any mathematician that you talk to in any other, math setting, they're gonna be using those same terms. So knowing them and understanding them and hearing them when we're young instead of saving them, go ahead and know that all these different, this is a way to say this, to communicate it. Although I will say that I was doing the spelling bee, the little game with the letters, and AMIG were some of the letters, and they did not count it. I was horrified. They didn't let me type in AMIG as a word. I was like, oh well, it was worth a shot. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. It is always a pleasure to be involved with CC families or those who are observing and maybe thinking to join, and who love the Lord and who love their children, who love learning, who are adults who want to think about things, want to talk about things, want to grow and to see God in more things, and then be able to have those conversations with each other. It's such a privilege to be a part of everything with you all. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll stay on for just a minute if anybody has any final things that they were wanting to share, but they feel like the time's up.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jill. You are as pleasant to listen to as Lisa Bailey. So,
Oh my goodness, that is some of one of the best compliments I've ever been given in my whole life. I love listening to her.
me too.